Hi, and thank you for joining us on the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, yours truly, Jeffrey Bellomo. I hope you're doing well today. I'm really looking forward to this podcast. Certainly a great topic today. Looking forward to chatting today about why asset protection, or should I protect my assets, and why? I want to remind everybody, like always, please do not take any advice that you receive on this show or any other show for that matter as legal advice. If you need an attorney, please contact an attorney in your area, in your state that is licensed to assist you in the type of matter that you're looking for. If you're in the state of Pennsylvania and you're looking for an estate planning and elder law attorney, we would be honored to assist you. Contact us at www.bellomoassociates.com or 717-845-5390. All right, so let's get into it today. Should I protect my assets? Well, this is a timely podcast today, and the reason I'm doing it is because of a situation that arose recently. Actually, a couple situations that arose recently and made me think about it and made me decide to do a podcast specifically on this topic. Yes, on other podcasts, we have talked about how asset protection works. We've talked about how the trusts work. We have definitely dove into that topic. What I have not specifically addressed, however, is should I? Or is it a good idea too, right? And I'll give you a quick sort of overview as to the reason why we are here today and having this specific conversation. So I have several kind of recent phone calls and meetings that I've had where people have said things such as, you know, my mom was in your office 6 years ago. She was talking about doing a trust and didn't do one and ended up in the nursing home, ended up losing significant amount of her assets. Another situation was, you know, a family member who came in, his parents decided to do a base will plan, not do any asset protection after death, and one of the siblings ended up losing all of their money. Unfortunately, the son became addicted to drugs, overdosed, and he died. And I honestly could give numerous other examples of cases that have occurred recently that got me thinking and sort of changed my perspective a little bit. You will notice, or at least I've noticed, that I have definitely become a little more opinionated, which I'm really not usually, to be completely honest with you. But I'm definitely becoming more opinionated in my old age, specifically about asset protection. There are two times that you can do asset protection, right? We can do asset protection during life or at death, okay? So those are essentially, you know, when you're creating your estate plan, you can do asset protection for you and your spouse so that while you're alive, your assets will be protected from long-term care costs, for example. And then when you die, there's also an opportunity for you to protect your assets for your children, for your grandchildren, for your spouse, right? Now, a lot of people, at least in the old days, we felt as though trusts were for only people who we didn't trust. You see the pun there? But I tell you what, that has changed a lot. In the old days, we only used trust defensively, meaning, are your kids bad with money? Are they in a bad marriage? Do they make bad decisions? Are they addicts? If yes, you should do a trust. If no, you probably don't need to protect the money. Just give it outright and let them handle it on their own. Well, I think we thought we were doing people a favor. But the truth is, bad things happen to good people, right? So you get money. You decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to take that money and I'm going to pay down my debt. I'm going to pay down the mortgage on the house. And then 6 months later, the wife files for divorce and takes half of the marital assets, which happens to be half of the money because you put it into the marital property. There's a lot of other examples, but we'll keep it simple for today. Voila, the child loses the money. let's say the child's receiving public benefits, right? They're on SSI, they're on Medicaid. Someone dies, gives the money outright, they lose their benefits, the money goes to the care or goes to the, whatever it is that they're receiving benefit-wise, the money's gone, all right? Well, there's no reason to do that. And even in a situation where a child might be healthy, happy, in good marriage, good with money, doesn't mean that bad things can't happen to that person. So there are ways to use asset protection after death to benefit children, okay? Also, you can also benefit spouses. So this is one of the places where I think that there is a big hole or gap in our area, in our society, as far as planning goes, right? When I ask a spouse, how do you want to give the money to your loved one? It's always outright. Well, what do you mean? I love her. Well, of course you love her. But if it goes outright, right, it's their money, 100%. So they start dating someone new, they give them the money. They decide to put in a pool, and they get a pool, and they get a pool boy. Maybe they give the pool boy the money, right? Or whatever the example is. Or worse yet, they end up having a car accident, and they end up in a nursing home, or they end up just needing to go to a nursing home. They're not healthy, they're not well, and they need to go there. Well, if the money goes outright, it takes 5 years if you choose to do a trust to protect assets. So if you come into my office today and say to me, I want to do a trust to preserve my assets, 5 years and 1 day has to pass before all of the assets are protected. But if instead we put the money in a trust for the benefit of the spouse, left a little bit of money in the spouse's name so that they can pay for their care for several months, all of the money that went to them would be fully protected, okay? You don't have to wait the 5 years. If a retirement account ever transfers to a spouse, in order for that retirement account to be protected, you have to liquidate it, and then you have to pay 100% of the taxes in 1 year in order to be able to protect it. You have to put it in a trust. You have to wait 5 years. Whereas if you did that right upon death, the money would be immediately protected. And sure, we would have some tax consequences, but I'd rather have tax consequences than lose 100% of it to the long-term care situation. So a phrase that I've started using is, you love your family way too much to leave the money outright to them. And I mean that. I think 15 years ago, I said it, but I don't know that I meant it because I didn't have the context. I didn't have the experience. I'd only been working in the field for maybe 5 years. I was fairly new. 15 years has gone by. A lot of bad stuff has happened, to be completely honest with you. And I've seen a lot of situations where people are coming back to me after the children lost the money, or after the spouse lost the money, or after the mom lost the money because she didn't do the asset protection during life, right? As we've talked about on other podcasts, asset protection during life uses a trust. We call it an asset protection trust, right? It's a grantor trust. It allows the person to still have some control, still have some say. Why are we able to do that? Well, because most of the clients that we work with do not have more than what the federal estate tax limit is. Currently, the federal estate tax limit is $12.06 million a person. So a husband and wife can have, what is that, $24.12 million, right? That's a lot of money. I have 0 clients currently who have that wealth or more, which means we're not dealing in a situation where we're worried about federal estate taxes. However, in the late 90s, we were. Absolutely. So in the late 90s, the federal estate tax limit was like $600,000. Lots of people were doing trust. Lots of people were using completed gift trusts, or tax trusts as we call them. But in those trusts, you cannot be the trustee, meaning the person who controls it if you were the person who created it or the grantor. You cannot have any incidents of ownership over the money. It's in a separate tax ID number. You pay higher trust tax rates. All kinds of stuff that go into it. Well, it's been years since we've done any of those. Yes, in 2025, the federal estate tax limit is set to come back to $5 million. Plus inflation, we're predicting about 5.8. So for a husband and wife, that'll be around 11.6 million. That's still a lot of money. Most clients will not have even that type of wealth. Gee, Jeff, can't the laws change? Gee, Jeff, can't Congress, completely overhaul that? I suppose, but to my knowledge and to my understanding, historically, the tax laws have always changed only when Congress had to act, right? They had to act because the law sunsetted. They had to act because there was no new laws in place, or it was going to revert back to something else, or there was nothing at all, the law sunsetted and there was nothing in place. That brings us back to, I believe it was 2010, if I'm not wrong. The law sunsetted. Steinbrenner died when there was no federal estate tax and saved his estate millions and millions of dollars, maybe billions, but certainly millions and millions of dollars. And, people believe that he hung on simply to avoid, that ridiculous tax. We'll never know. But regardless, my point is, Congress historically has only acted when they had to. Well, now they don't ever have to because the law is set to go forever. It's set for inflation. It'll come back in 2025, and then essentially it'll just continue on. Well, that's interesting because they won't have to act, which means they probably won't. I know the conspiracy theorists out there are going to say, well, if these people get in charge, yeah, I understand that. But who does the federal estate tax impact more than anyone else, right? The people with a lot of wealth. And who are some of the wealthiest people in our country? Yeah, our congressmen and women, the people in the Senate, the people in politics. Well, they're the ones voting on these laws. So it would also not be smart on their part to vote for something that is only going to impact them at a higher rate than it would anyone else. So my personal feeling is that they're not going to act anytime soon. They're going to let it come back in 2025 to 5 million. It's set for inflation. I think they're going to let it ride for a while. My personal feeling is that they have far bigger things to worry about than that. Now, obviously, that and $1.25, and you can't get a cup of coffee at McDonald's. So we'll take it with a grain of salt. But I believe we're pretty comfortable now. I believe that the estate and gift tax is set for a long time. And I think we just start planning and making decisions based upon what the laws will be. All right. Obviously, as we do this podcast in 2022, inflation is at a high. The market is all over the place, up and down. And I understand all that. There's a lot of talk currently about heading into a recession. You know what? We will handle that if it comes, and certainly we will make the best of it, and we will get through it. We always do. I just can't imagine that they're going to change the estate tax and gift tax laws because they don't have to. And again, it's going to affect them more than it's going to affect most individuals. So wait and see. We'll sit back and see what occurs. But as far as planning goes, we aren't using tax trusts hardly at all anymore, which frees us up to be able to use asset protection trusts, trust where grantor can be a trustee, trust where changes to the documents can occur, trust where we want it included in their estate. Because the grantor has control, we will have to pay Pennsylvania inheritance tax. Gee, Jeff, what is Pennsylvania inheritance tax? Great question. If you're a resident of Pennsylvania and you transfer wealth at the time of your death, there is a tax on the transfer of wealth, right? For the privilege of living in the Commonwealth and for transferring wealth in the Commonwealth, there's going to be a tax. Currently, in 2022, it is 0 to a spouse, 4.5% to lineal descendants. That's children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents. If we go to siblings, it's 12%. If we go to anyone else in the world, it's 15%. including those lovely nieces and nephews. All right, here's the good news. Whether the person had the money in their name alone, or whether they had it in a trust that they controlled at the time of their death, it is still subject to inheritance tax. I look at the inheritance tax as a nuisance tax. I look at it as a pimple on your back that annoys you. It goes away, comes back 6 months later, and annoys you again. Nothing more than that. Gee, Jeff, why would you say that? Well, 4.5% to children, grandchildren, that's not a lot. And I do understand that other states have an exemption, an exemption of the first $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever. Pennsylvania doesn't. We tax from the first dollar, but we're taxing at an extremely low rate. And here's the advantage. Because we're taxing and you're in control, whether it's in your name alone or whether it's in a trust that you control, at the date of death, that's the day that we are going to value the assets that are transferring to your beneficiaries. So let's say that somebody buys a house. They pay $20,000 for it. But on the day that they die, it's worth $200,000. The beneficiaries who received the house, as long as it was in the individual's name alone, or it was in a trust that they controlled at the time of their death, the value to the beneficiary is now $200,000. Yes, the estate of the decedent or the person who passed away or the testator, right? They all mean the same thing. They pay the inheritance tax at 4.5%. But when the beneficiary receives the asset, the value to them is the date of death value. So, for example, let's say somebody died on November 1st. And on December 1st, the deed is now put into the name of the beneficiary. Okay, I'm just making dates up here. But the value is the value on the date of death, which was $200,000. So let's say that the child decides to sell the house and sell it for $200,000. Well, 200 minus 200 is 0. 0 is what is subject to capital gains tax. If, however, the parent decided to gift the asset to the child, I don't know, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, the basis that the child receives is the basis that the parent had. In my example, that was $20,000. What does that mean? Well, when he goes to sell it for $200,000, what's 200 minus 20? $180,000, subject to capital gains tax. Now, the rates are based upon income of the beneficiary in the year that they received it, but in a lot of cases, it ends up being 23.8%. Okay, would you rather pay 4.5 on 200 or 23.8 on 180? Right? We all know the answer to that. So I bring that up in the context of this podcast and why we should do asset protection, because if you do a trust during your life and you're in control of it, there are still ways to get asset protection, still get the step up in basis, but also not lose the asset to long-term care costs and allow your kids to avoid huge capital gains taxes. Gee, Jeff, what if the laws change? I get that question almost every day, and I, to be completely honest with you, stopped paying attention to everything I hear about potential changes in the law or about things that could be coming down the pike. Why? Because they've talked about changing 50 different laws that I can think of for the last 20 years. Since the day I started, they were changing that look back, right? It was 3 years. It's now 5 years. I've been hearing for years it's going to be 7. I've been hearing it's going to be 10. It's still 5, right? I could go on and on. There's probably at least 15 to 20 different things that for most of my career I've been told it's going to change. And yet, most of it hasn't. Sure. Did I expect the Secure Act to come down the way it did in regards to retirement accounts? No, I didn't. But you know what? As soon as it came out, we rallied, we pivoted, we made changes to our documents, we moved forward, we have a plan in place, life is good. So my advice is live today, enjoy every moment, don't worry about things that may or may not change in the future. We'll deal with it if it does, right? And that's the advantage of having counsel. That's the advantage of working with a law firm that you trust, that you like, that you admire, that you want to be with, that you know that if a change occurs, they'll be right by your side. Make that change with you. Make sure that they take care of you. That is what a good law firm will provide for you. So I really hope that you learned something today. The short conclusion to today's podcast is, in my opinion, you love your family way too much to not protect them during your life and to not protect them after death. I truly believe in asset protection planning, both for you while you're alive to not lose your assets to long-term care costs. And I also truly believe in protecting your assets for your children after your death. Whether they're spendthrifts, whether they're not, whether they're in good marriages or bad marriages, whether they're good people or not, it doesn't matter, right? The way that we can protect the assets these days allows us, if we trust someone, to still be in control. They can appoint a co-trustee. They can fire that co-trustee if they don't do what they want, or if they don't do what they were intending to do, or they don't carry out the wishes of the person who is the beneficiary. They have come so far. We can use trust now offensively. We can use it as a tool. We can use it as a way to protect. And I truly believe that that is the best way to go. I truly believe that you love your family way too much not to protect them. If you'd like to learn more about trust and asset protection planning, please come to one of our free workshops. We offer them on a weekly basis, both in York and Lancaster, and we also have links so that you can stay in the comfort of your home and watch one, or we even offer them via Zoom, and you can watch them while we're giving it live in the room. You can be at home as well. We offer workshops on pre-planning, which is estate planning and asset protection, crisis planning, which is anyone who is or will be in a nursing home within the next 6 months, special needs planning for anyone who has a disability or maybe receiving public benefits, or a family member who that applies to. We offer those workshops. If you have a loved one who recently passed away, we have probate and trust administration workshops to discuss the process and to discuss what they're going to have to go through in order to be able to administer the estate or the trust to carry out the wishes of the person who passed away. Please check us out at www.bellomoassociates.com or 717-845-5390. Thanks for joining us on the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, yours truly, Jeffrey Bellomo. We look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.